I think you have said, in fact, and I'm going to quote, development of superhuman machine intelligence is probably the greatest threat to the continued existence of humanity, end quote. You may have had in mind the effect on jobs, which is really my biggest nightmare in the long term. Let me ask you what your biggest nightmare is and whether you share that concern.
Like with all technological revolutions, I expect there to be significant impact on jobs, but exactly what that impact looks like is very difficult to predict. If we went back to the other side of a previous technological revolution, talking about the jobs that exist on the other side, you can go back and read books of this. It's what people said at the time. It's difficult. I believe that there will be far greater jobs on the other side of this, and that the jobs of today will get better. I think it's important. First of all, I think it's important to understand and think about GPT-4 as a tool, not a creature, which is easy to get confused, and it's a tool that people have a great deal of control over and how they use it. And second, GPT-4 and other systems like it, are good at doing tasks, not jobs. And so you see already people that are using GPT-4 to do their job much more efficiently by helping them with tasks. Now, GPT-4 will, I think, entirely automate away some jobs, and it will create new ones that we believe will be much better. This happens, again, my understanding of the history of technology is one long technological revolution, not a bunch of different ones put together, but this has been continually happening. As our quality of life raises and as machines and tools that we create can help us live better lives, the bar raises for what we do, and our human ability and what we spend our time going after goes after more ambitious, more satisfying projects. So there will be an impact on jobs. We try to be very clear about that, and I think it will require partnership between the industry and government, but mostly action by government to figure out how we want to mitigate that. But I'm very optimistic about how great the jobs of the future will be.
One of the things that you mentioned, Mr. Altman, that intrigued me was you said GPT-4 can refuse harmful requests. So you must have put some thought into how your system, if I can call it that, can refuse harmful requests. What do you consider a harmful request? You can just keep it short.
Yeah. I'll give a few examples. One would be about violent content. Okay. Another would be about content that's encouraging self-harm. Another is adult content. Not that we think adult content is inherently harmful, but there's things that could be associated with that we cannot reliably enough differentiate, so we refuse all of it.
So those are some of the more obvious harmful kinds of information. But in the election context, for example, I saw a picture of former President Trump being arrested by NYPD, and that went viral. I don't know, is that considered harmful? I've seen all kinds of statements attributed to any one of us that could be put out there that may not rise to your level of harmful content, but there you have it. So two of you said that we should have a licensing scheme. I can't envision or imagine right now what kind of a licensing scheme we would be able to create to pretty much regulate the vastness of this game-changing tool. So are you thinking of an FTC kind of a system, an FCC kind of a system? What do the two of you even envision as a potential licensing scheme that would provide the kind of guardrails that we need to protect literally our country from harmful content?
To touch on the first part of what you said, there are things besides should this content be generated or not, that I think are also important. So that image that you mentioned was generated. I think it'd be a great policy to say generated images need to be made clear in all contexts that they were generated. And, then we still have the image out there, but we're at least requiring people to say this was a generated image.
Okay, well, you don't need an entire licensing scheme in order to make that a reality.
Where I think the licensing scheme comes in is not for what these models are capable of today, because as you pointed out, you don't need a new licensing agency to do that. But as we head, and this may take a long time, I'm not sure, as we head towards artificial general intelligence, and the impact that will have, and the power of that technology, I think we need to treat that as seriously as we treat other very powerful technologies. And that's where I personally think we need such a scheme.
I agree, and that is why by the time we're talking about AGI, we're talking about major harms that can occur through the use of.
Went in this weekend and I said, write me a song that sounds like Garth Brooks, and it gave me a different version of Simple Man. So it's interesting that it would do that, but you're training it on these copyrighted songs, these MIDI files, these sound technologies. So as you do this, who owns the rights to that AI-generated material? And using your technology, could I remake a song, insert content from my favorite artist, and then own the creative rights to that song?
Thank you, Senator. This is an area of great interest to us. I would say, first of all, we think that creators deserve control over how their creations are used and what happens sort of beyond the point of them releasing it into the world. Second, I think that we need to figure out new ways with this new technology that creators can win, succeed, have a vibrant life, and I'm optimistic that this will present it.
Then let me ask you this. How do you compensate the artist?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
We're working with artists now, visual artists, musicians, to figure out what people want. There's a lot of different opinions, unfortunately, and at some point we'll have to.
Let me ask you this. Do you favor something like Sound Exchange that has worked in the area of radio?
I'm not familiar with Sound Exchange, I'm sorry.
Streaming. Okay, you've got your team behind you. Get back to me on that. That would be a third-party entity.
Okay.
So let's discuss that. Let me move on. Can you commit, as you've done with consumer data, not to train ChatGPT, OpenAI, Jukebox, or other AI models on artists and songwriters' copyrighted works, or use their voices and their likenesses without first receiving their consent?
So first of all, Jukebox is not a product we offer. That was a research release, but it's not, unlike ChatGPT or DALL-E.
Yeah, but we've lived through Napster.
Yes.
And that was something that really cost a lot of artists a lot of money.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, for sure.
In the digital distribution era.
I don't know the numbers on Jukebox on the top of my head as a research release. I can follow up with your office, but it's not. Jukebox is not something that gets much attention or usage. It was put out to show that something's possible.
Well, Senator Durbin just said, and I think it's a fair warning to you all. If we're not involved in this from the get-go, and you all already are a long way down the path on this, but if we don't step in, then this gets away from you. So are you working with the Copyright Office? Are you considering protections for content generators and creators in generative AI?
Yes, we are absolutely engaged on that. Again, to reiterate my earlier point, we think that content creators, content owners need to benefit from this technology. Exactly what the economic model is, we're still talking to artists and content owners about what they want. I think there's a lot of ways this can happen, but very clearly, no matter what the law is, the right thing to do is to make sure people get significant upside benefit from this new technology. And we believe that it's really going to deliver that, but that content owners, likenesses, people totally deserve control over how that's used and to benefit from it.
Sam, just going to you for the little bit of time I have left. Real quick, first of all, you're a bit of a unicorn when I sat down with you first. Could you explain why nonprofit? In other words, you're not looking necessarily, and you've even capped the VC people. Just really quickly, I want folks to understand that.
We started as a nonprofit, really focused on how this technology was going to be built. At the time, it was very outside the Overton window that something like AGI was even possible. That's shifted a lot. We didn't know at the time how important scale was going to be, but we did know that we wanted to build this with humanity's best interest at heart, and a belief that this technology could, if it goes the way we want, if we can do some of those things Professor Marcus mentioned, really deeply transformed the world. And we wanted to be as much of a force for getting to a positive vision.
I'm going to interrupt you. I think that's all good. I hope more of that gets out on the record. The second part of my question as well, I found it fascinating. But are you ever going to, for a revenue model, for return on your investors, are you ever going to do ads or something like that?
I wouldn't say never. I don't think, I think there may be people that we want to offer services to and there's no other model that works, but I really like having a subscription-based model. We have API developers pay us and we have ChatGPT.
Okay, can I
pay
jump
us.
to then can I just jump
Sure.
real quickly? One of my biggest concerns about this space is what I've already seen in the space of Web 2, Web 3, is this massive corporate concentration. It is really terrifying to see how few companies now control and affect the lives of so many of us, and these companies are getting bigger and more powerful. And I see, OpenAI backed by Microsoft, Anthropic is backed by Google. Google has its own in-house product, Bar. So I'm really worried about that. And I'm wondering if Sam, you can give me a quick acknowledgement. Are you worried about the corporate concentration in this space and what effect it might have, and the associated risks, perhaps, with market concentration in AI? And then, Mr. Marcus, can you answer that as well?
I think there will be many people that develop models. What's happening now in the open source community is amazing, but there will be a relatively small number of providers that can make models at the true
Is there
leading
danger
edge.
in that?
I think there is benefits and danger to that. Like, as we were talking about all of the dangers with AI, the fewer of us that you really have to keep a careful eye on the absolute bleeding edge of capabilities, there's benefits there. But then I think there needs to be enough, and there will, because there's so much value, that consumers have choice, that we have different ideas.
Do you have some concern about a few players with extraordinary resources and power to influence Washington? I mean, I see us. I'm a big believer in the free market, but the reason why I walk into a bodega and a Twinkie is cheaper than an apple, or a Happy Meal costs less than a bucket of salad, is because of the way the government tips the scales to pick winners and losers. So the free market is not what it should be when you have large corporate power that can even influence the game here. Do you have some concerns about that in this next era of technological innovation?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's so much of why we started OpenAI. We have huge concerns about that. I think it's important to democratize the inputs to these systems, the values that we're going to align to. And I think it's also important to give people wide use of these tools. When we started the API strategy, which is a big part of how we make our systems available for anyone to use, there was a huge amount of skepticism over that, and it does come with challenges, that's for sure. But we think putting this in the hands of a lot of people and not in the hands of a few companies is really quite important. And we are seeing the resultant innovation boom from that. But it is absolutely true that the number of companies that can train the true frontier models is going to be small just because of the resources required. And so I think there needs to be incredible scrutiny on us and our competitors. I think there is a rich and exciting industry happening of incredibly good research and new startups that are not just using our models, but creating their own. And I think it's important to make sure that whatever regulatory stuff happens, whatever new agencies may or may not happen, we preserve that fire, because that's critical.
I'm a big believer in the democratizing potential of technology, but I've seen the promise of that fail time and time again, where people said, oh, this is going to have a big democratizing force. My team works on a lot of issues about the reinforcing of bias through algorithms, the failure to advertise certain opportunities in certain zip codes. But you seem to be saying, and I heard this with Web3, that this is going to be decentralized finance. All these things are going to happen. But this seems to me not even to offer that promise, because the people who are designing these, it takes so much power, energy, resources. Are you saying that my dreams of technology, further democratizing opportunity and more, are possible within a technology that is ultimately, I think, going to be very centralized to a few players who already control so much?
So this point that I made about use of the model and building on top of it, this is really a new platform, right? It is definitely important to talk about who's going to create the models. I want to do that. I also think it's really important to decide to whose values we're going to align these models. But in terms of using the models, the people that build on top of the OpenAI API do incredible things. And it's, people frequently comment, like, I can't believe you get this much technology for this little money. And so the companies people are building, putting AI everywhere, using our API, which does let us put safeguards in place, I think that's quite exciting, and I think that is how it is being not how it's going to be, but how it is being democratized right now. There is a whole new Cambrian explosion of new businesses, new products, new services happening by lots of different companies on top of these models.
And so I'll say, Chairman, as I close, that I have most industries resist even reasonable regulation, from seatbelt laws to we've been talking a lot recently about rail safety. The only way we're going to see the democratization of values, I think, and while there are noble companies out there, is if we create rules of the road that enforce certain safety measures like we've seen with other technologies.